That mound of earth was like an ugly raised scar sitting squarely in the middle of Nathan's perfectly manicured backyard. It was the only thing on this Oregon farm that lay outside his control. Nathan hated it. He had spent a full 6 months, limping on one leg after a workplace accident, renovating the place. He installed expensive floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass panels to let in sunlight, laid warm oak flooring, and turned it into a healing fortress for his family. Everything was perfect, clean, and safe. Everything except that pile of dirt tangled with weeds and the dull gray rock, the very thing the excavator operator had refused to level the week before, citing that the soil was too hard. "Nathan! Get down here, now!" Audrey's panicked cry tore through the quiet afternoon. Her voice didn't carry the usual tone of fear. It trembled, choked, like someone who had just witnessed an accident. Nathan dropped the screwdriver and limped down the stairs. "What's wrong? Did Felix fall?" "No, look. Look at the camera feed. Don't go out yet." Audrey was standing in the kitchen, both hands gripping the edge of the granite countertop, her face completely drained of color. She jerked her chin toward the iPad streaming live footage from the backyard security camera. Nathan picked up the tablet. The screen showed the backyard at 3 p.m. Washed in pale yellow sunlight, the wind bending the weeds. Felix, their 3-year-old son, was standing there. The boy wasn't playing on the swing. He wasn't digging in the dirt. Felix stood motionless by the back glass door, pressing his chubby face and tiny hands against the cold surface. His eyes weren't wandering aimlessly. He was focused intensely on a single point, the wild mound of earth. "How long has he been standing there?" Nathan asked, a chill beginning to crawl up his spine. 15 minutes, Audrey whispered, eyes fixed on their son. "And Nathan, he's smiling." Nathan squinted at the screen. Audrey was right. Felix was smiling. It wasn't the goofy grin he wore while watching cartoons, nor the excited smile when his dad came home. It was a polite smile. The smile of someone courteously listening to another person's story. Suddenly, Felix raised his tiny index finger. He pointed straight into the empty air above the gray rock. His lips moved. "He's talking," Nathan muttered, his stomach tightening. "Can you hear what he's saying?" "I'm too scared to get closer." Audrey trembled. "He keeps nodding, then shaking his head. Like someone is standing right there on the other side of the glass with him." Nathan tossed the iPad onto the sofa. A territorial instinct surged stronger than the vague fear. This was his house. He had shed sweat and blood to build it. No force, human or ghost, was allowed to frighten his wife and child. "Stay here," Nathan ordered, his voice hardening. He opened the side door and stepped into the backyard. The October cold wind in Oregon slammed into his face, carrying the damp smell of soil and rotting leaves. "Felix?" Nathan called out. The boy startled and spun around. The polite smile vanished, replaced by the familiar innocent expression. "Daddy!" Felix cried. Nathan hurried toward his son, but his eyes continued to glare toward the mound of earth. Just weeds. Just a lifeless gray rock. No one there. Of course there was no one there. "What are you doing out here, Felix?" "Daddy told you not to go near this dirty place," Nathan said, forcing calm as he crouched to eye level. Felix blinked, his finger still pointing toward the rock. "I'm listening to a story." "A story? Who's telling you a story?" Nathan pressed, cold sweat forming on his forehead despite the freezing air. "Mommy?" Felix shook his head vigorously. He ran over and hugged Nathan's leg for support, yet his finger stubbornly pointed behind his father, straight toward the desolate space on the mound. "Not Mommy," Felix whispered, his clear childish voice rising amid the howling wind, creating a chilling contrast. "It's the man." Nathan whipped around. "Empty." "Which man, Felix?" "There's no one here." Nathan was losing patience, his voice louder than necessary. Felix shrank back, his big eyes flicking between his father and the rock, as if apologizing to the invisible man for his dad's rudeness. Then he rose onto his tiptoes, leaned close to Nathan's ear, and whispered a sentence that made every hair on Nathan's body stand on end. "Daddy, he says you're very tall." Nathan froze, his breath caught in his chest. "He says," Felix continued, his tone innocent but conveying a meaning terrifyingly precise, "he has to look up to see your face. Because his leg hurts, and he can't stand up." Over the next 2 days, the atmosphere inside the fragrant Pinewood house grew thick and oppressive, as if an invisible fog were seeping into every corner. Nathan tried to reassure himself that it was all just an overactive imagination, but Felix's behavior became increasingly strange, defying all logic. At lunchtime, while clearing the table, Audrey noticed that half an apple she had just placed on a plate was gone. She looked out the kitchen window and felt her heart seize. Felix was squatting outside, despite the cold wind, carefully placing that half apple onto the gray rock on the mound of earth. "Again, Nathan," Audrey whispered, her voice trembling as she called to her husband. "What is he doing out there? Is he making an offering?" "Don't use that word," Nathan frowned. "He's just playing house. Kids imagine invisible friends all the time." "Invisible friends don't make our son carry food outside in 5-degree weather, Nathan." Audrey turned to him, panic in her eyes. "Don't you find it strange? He's acting like he's taking care of someone." Nathan didn't answer. He felt it too, but admitting the fear would mean admitting he had lost control. That night, the unease reached its peak. Around 9 p.m. When the house was wrapped in silence, Nathan passed by Felix's room. The door was slightly ajar, warm yellow light spilling into the hallway. He was about to step in to tuck his son in when he stopped. There was singing. But it wasn't Felix's usual bright, off-key children's songs. It was a low, muffled sound, steady and humming in the throat. The strange melody was slow and solemn, like an ancient march, yet sung with a mournful lullaby rhythm. Nathan quietly pushed the door open. Felix was sitting with his back to the door, busy snapping together red and blue Lego pieces. His small shadow swayed on the wall in time with that eerie tune. "Felix?" Nathan called softly. The humming stopped instantly. Felix turned around, his eyes shining as he looked at his dad. "What are you doing?" Nathan tried to keep his voice normal as he sat beside him. "And that song. Where did you learn it? From YouTube?" Felix shook his head, still holding a rectangular Lego piece. "No. Mr. Slate taught me." Nathan frowned. The name sounded unfamiliar, yet carried an unseen weight. "Mr. Slate? Who is that, buddy? A friend from preschool?" "No," Felix replied calmly, pointing toward the pitch-black window overlooking the backyard. "It's him. He's out there. He says if you sing like this, the leg will forget it hurts." Nathan felt a cold jolt of electricity run down his spine. Again, his leg ached. "He went into my room?" Nathan asked, his voice beginning to lose its composure. "No, he's dirty. He doesn't go inside the house." Felix shrugged, continuing to snap his toy pieces together. "He just stands at the window and hums. He's sad because it's cold, Dad." Nathan sprang to his feet. Anger flared up to smother the fear. He was convinced that someone was putting this nonsense into his son's head. Maybe Walter, the eccentric old neighbor who lived 2 miles away. "That's enough," Nathan growled. "Tomorrow I'll go talk to Walter. He's not allowed to tell you ghost stories anymore." He turned to leave the room, but Audrey's panicked scream from the living room froze him in place. "Nathan, get down here now." "Oh God." Nathan bolted down the stairs, his heart pounding. Audrey was standing in front of the massive sliding glass door that looked out onto the backyard. She staggered backward, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. "What is it?" Nathan shouted, rushing to catch her. "Look. On the glass." Audrey pointed, her voice breaking. Moisture from outside had condensed on the glass because of the temperature difference. And on that foggy surface, clear impressions were stamped. They were two adult human handprints. Large. Coarse. But what made Nathan go numb wasn't their size. It was their position. The handprints were pressed near the very bottom edge of the glass, only about 20 centimeters above the floor. No one stands and puts their hands that low. Nathan muttered, his throat bone dry. He remembered Felix's words. "His leg hurts, he can't stand up." Those handprints looked like they belonged to someone kneeling, or someone trying to crawl toward the warm light of the house to look inside. Audrey clutched Nathan's shirt, sobbing. "It's not Walter, Nathan. He has arthritis, he couldn't crawl out into the yard in weather like this. Nathan, what is it that's out there?" Nathan stared at the two handprints as they slowly faded from the glass. His patience and rationality were gone. He turned to his wife, his eyes blazing with iron resolve mixed with absolute terror. "I don't care who it is or what it is," Nathan said coldly. "Tomorrow morning, I'm hiring a bulldozer. I'm flattening that damn dirt mound. I'm ending this game once and for all." Nathan's bold declaration to flatten the mound could not be carried out the next morning. Nature itself seemed to rage in response to his arrogance. That night, a record-breaking blizzard slammed into Oregon without warning. The wind howled like wild beasts clawing at the wooden walls. The temperature dropped to -15 degrees Celsius. By midnight, the entire region's power grid was knocked out. The smart house Nathan's pride suddenly became a dark, freezing cave. Nathan tossed and turned in a restless sleep, his hand still gripping a flashlight. Then a piercing scream tore through the stillness of the night, jolting him upright like a spring. "Nathan! Where is he? Nathan!" It was Audrey's voice. Nathan leapt out of bed, turned on the flashlight, its beam wobbling wildly down the long hallway. "I'm here." "What's wrong?" Nathan shouted, his heart hammering. "Felix. His bed is empty." Audrey stood at the doorway of their son's room, her face deathly pale, her trembling hand pointing at the rumpled blankets. "I just went to check on him and he's gone." Nathan shone the light into the room. Empty. A blast of icy wind rushed in from the stairwell, carrying swirling white snowflakes that danced in the flashlight beam. "The back door," Nathan whispered, a primal fear crushing his throat. "The back door is open." The couple ran downstairs. The massive sliding glass door, the one that had held the mysterious handprints the day before, was now wide open. Snow and wind poured into the living room, covering the expensive oak floor with a white layer. "Felix. Answer me." Nathan roared, throwing himself into the white night outside, ignoring the storm whipping painfully against his face. Audrey ran after him, sobbing, "Felix. Where are you?" Nathan's flashlight beam swept frantically across the backyard. The wind was too strong, the snow too thick, visibility reduced to less than 2 meters. But Nathan knew where to look. A father's instinct guided him, and his fear of the invisible friend showed the way. He aimed the flashlight toward the dirt mound, and there, in the midst of the blinding snowstorm, was a small figure kneeling on the ground. "Felix!" Nathan screamed, charging forward, his legs sinking deep into the snow. The 3-year-old boy, wearing only thin bear-patterned pajamas, was shivering violently, his lips purple. But Felix didn't look scared or like he wanted to run back into the house. He was doing something that froze Nathan in stunned paralysis. Felix was taking off the small sheep wool blanket he always carried with him and trying to drape it over the gray, rough stone. His tiny hands, red from the cold, carefully smoothed the blanket over the rock, as if tucking in someone who was sleeping. "Don't be cold anymore," Felix whispered, his voice breaking in the howling wind, but Nathan heard it clearly as he rushed closer. I'm sorry, Dad wouldn't let me come out sooner. Please don't be mad at my dad. Felix. What the hell are you doing? Nathan yelled, grabbing his son and scooping him up. The child's body was icy, like a block of frozen stone. Felix struggled in his father's arms, tears streaming down his face, his hands still reaching toward the stone. Dad, leave it. Mr. Slate is really cold. His clothes are all torn. Give him the blanket back. There's no one here. You're going to freeze to death. Nathan shouted, his voice cracking with fear and rage. He turned to run back to the house. But he's shaking, Dad. Can't you see? Felix sobbed, pointing at the bare stone beneath the sheep wool blanket that the wind was trying to rip away. A mad, irrational curiosity suddenly seized Nathan's mind. Why did his son believe in that presence so completely? Why would he sacrifice his most beloved blanket in the middle of a blizzard? For a split second, before turning away, Nathan reached out with his bare hand to the stone to snatch the blanket back, intending to carry both his son and the blanket inside. But the instant Nathan's fingers touched the gray stone beneath the freezing snow, he froze. Nathan's pupils dilated fully. He stopped breathing. The stone was warm. It wasn't warmth stored from daytime heat, because the temperature had been below freezing for 12 hours. It wasn't a numb-induced hallucination. It was physical warmth. A lingering, unmistakable warmth, radiating from the stone's surface, exactly like the warmth from the back of a grown man who had just been leaning against it seconds before Nathan arrived. What are you doing? Get inside, Nathan. Audrey screamed from the doorway, her voice utterly hysterical. Nathan stared at the empty space above the stone. Snow was falling heavily, but strangely, the flakes that landed right next to the stone seemed to melt instantly before touching the ground. See, Dad? Felix buried his head into Nathan's chest, whispering weakly from the cold. I told you he was here. Nathan swallowed hard and held his son tightly. For the first time since moving here, his arrogance completely collapsed. He no longer felt like the owner of this land. Something else was here, something that could generate warmth in the middle of a blizzard, something that had been quietly existing in his backyard all along, and that something had just accepted his son's blanket. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a white, eerily silent world. But that silence was quickly shattered by the rough sound of shovels digging into the earth. Nathan couldn't wait for the bulldozer. The events of the previous night, the uncanny warmth from the rock, and Felix's insane act of sacrifice had pushed his endurance past its limit. He needed an answer. He needed to drag whatever was hiding beneath that soil out into the sunlight, whether it was rotted tree roots or some dark secret. Nathan. Please, stop. Audrey shouted from behind the glass door, clutching Felix tightly in her arms. The ground is frozen. You're torturing yourself. Nathan didn't look up. His breath burst out in thick white clouds, sweat soaking the back of his jacket despite the biting cold. I have to get to the bottom of this, Audrey. Nathan roared, his voice echoing across the empty yard. I have to show our son there's nothing down here. There is no Mr. Slate. Just dirt and rocks and worms. But Mr. Slate is sleeping, Daddy. Felix whimpered, his nose pressed to the glass. You're waking him up. Nathan ground his teeth, raised the shovel high, and drove it down with all his strength into the softer earth right next to the base of the rock. Clang! A shrill sound rang out. The shovel blade didn't sink into soil, it struck metal. A jolt shot up Nathan's arms, leaving them numb. He froze. Inside the house, Audrey stopped breathing. What is that? Nathan muttered. He tossed the shovel aside, dropped to his knees, and frantically scraped away the soggy mud with his bare hands. It wasn't a coffin. And it wasn't bones. What emerged beneath the dark brown soil was a military ammunition box made of olive green metal, the kind commonly seen in the 1992nd, mottled with rust. What is that? Audrey cracked the door open and stepped out, curiosity overcoming fear. She crept closer, Felix still clinging to her. A box, Nathan breathed, his heart pounding. Someone buried it here. Very carefully. The box was sealed around the edges with tar to keep it waterproof. Nathan's hands trembled as he popped the latch. Click. The lid sprang open, releasing a strange scent, the smell of cold ash, old fabric, and time held still. There was no gold or treasure inside, only a tattered military uniform, blackened with smoke, neatly folded. On top of it lay a tarnished brass Zippo lighter. And a black and white photograph, obsessively laminated. "Oh my God!" Audrey gasped, covering her mouth. "It's a soldier's." Nathan picked up the photo. His hands shook so violently that the image wavered before his eyes. In the picture was a young man in military uniform, his face smeared with grime but his eyes blazing with determination. He was holding a newborn baby in his arms. The baby was wrapped in the very same torn military jacket lying in the box. But what made Nathan's stomach twist wasn't the soldier. It was the baby. The newborn in the photo was crying desperately, its head thrown back, revealing a very distinctive dark red birthmark shaped like a maple leaf just beneath the left collarbone. Nathan instinctively raised a hand to his own neck. His fingers touched the familiar rough patch of skin, the leaf-shaped birthmark he had carried since birth. "Nathan." Audrey looked at her husband, then at the photo, her voice breaking in shock. "That birthmark, this baby, is that you?" Nathan couldn't speak. He stared at the young soldier in the photo. This stranger was holding him, his infant self, with boundless protection and love. Felix was finally set down on the ground. The little boy toddled over to the hole, peering into the rusted metal box with bright eyes, as if greeting an old friend. "Ah, his coat," Felix exclaimed, pointing at the smoke-stained uniform. Then he looked up at Nathan and said something casually that sent chills racing over Nathan's entire body, not from fear, but from a staggering truth just revealed. "Daddy, Mr. Slate says you should give him his coat back. He says you peed all over it when you were little and got him all wet." Nathan dropped the photo into the snow. How? How could an imaginary friend of his son know about a peeing accident from when Nathan was a newborn? A detail even he couldn't remember, and that his adoptive parents had never mentioned. The one buried beneath this mound of earth was not a demon. Who is he?" Nathan whispered, tears beginning to well up and blur the image of the young soldier at his feet. Felix smiled, picked up the Zippo lighter, and slowly read the crudely engraved name with his limited vocabulary. S.E.B. Mr. Sebastian. "His name is Sebastian, Daddy." Nathan didn't remember how he ran to the neighbor's house. He clutched the rusted ammo box to his chest as if it contained a ticking bomb, his limping legs carrying him through the deep snow to Walter's front porch. Old man Walter, 75 years old, was sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, holding a steaming cup of hot coffee. He squinted at the younger neighbor who stood there gasping for breath, face pale and shaken. "What's wrong, son? The bulldozer break down?" Walter asked, his slow voice thick with an Oregon accent. Nathan didn't answer. He slammed the cold metal box onto the coffee table in front of the old man, then tremblingly placed the Zippo lighter and the laminated photo on top. "Do you know this man?" Nathan asked, his voice hoarse and pleading. "Please, Mr. Walter. You've lived here your whole life. You have to know who he is." Nathan asked. Walter set his coffee down. His weathered, age-spotted hand slowly reached out and picked up the lighter. His thumb gently traced the name Sebastian, engraved on the dulled brass. Walter's cloudy eyes widened. A tear rolled down his sagging cheek and dropped onto the lighter. "Good Lord," Walter whispered, his voice breaking. "You dug him up, didn't you?" "Who is he?" Nathan pressed, his heart pounding in his chest. "Why does he have a photo of me? Why is he buried in my backyard?" Walter looked up at Nathan, his eyes filled with a sorrow that had stretched on for 3 decades. He sighed, his breath turning into white mist in the freezing air. He wasn't a farmer, Nathan. His name was Sebastian Miller, but back then the kids around here called him Slate because he always wore ash-gray clothes and was as silent as a rock. Slate. Nathan murmured, a chill running down his spine. That was exactly the name Felix had mentioned. He was a veteran, suffering from severe PTSD after the war, Walter continued, his voice dropping as if telling a grim fairy tale. He lived alone in a ramshackle shack on the very land you're living on now. The townspeople shunned him. They said he was crazy because he used to talk to the trees. Walter paused, staring off toward the snow-covered road ahead. On Christmas Eve 30 years ago, a car lost control in a snowstorm. It slid off the road, flipped 3 times, and slammed into the old oak tree in front of Slate's shack. The car went up in flames like a torch. Nathan held his breath. His hand unconsciously tightened on the edge of the wooden table. That was your biological parents' car. Walter turned and looked straight into Nathan's eyes. Back then, the whole town only dared to stand and watch from a distance. Everyone was afraid the car would explode. The fire was so intense it even melted the snow around it. But Slate wasn't afraid. Walter choked up. That madman everyone shunned. He ran straight into the sea of flames. I swear I saw the fire catch in his hair. He ripped the car door open with his bare hands. He couldn't save your parents. The flames were too strong. But he managed to pull a cradle out. Nathan felt as if his chest were being crushed by an invisible hand. He looked down at the photo of the young soldier holding a baby. What happened after that? Nathan asked, his voice trembling. Did the ambulance get there in time? Walter shook his head sadly. The blizzard was too severe. It took the ambulance 4 hours to reach the site. That night it was -20 degrees, just like last night. Slate was badly burned, his clothes half burned away. But he didn't run to find shelter. He was afraid that moving would make you hurt. The old man pointed toward the tattered jacket inside the ammunition crate. He took off his last military jacket, the only thing keeping him warm, to wrap you in it. He sat with his back against that rock, holding you tightly against his chest, using the last of his body heat to keep you warm for 4 hours in the middle of the blizzard. Nathan closed his eyes. The image of Felix covering the rock with a blanket appeared vividly in his mind. He's very cold, Dad. When the medics arrived, Walter wiped his tears with the back of his hand. You were still alive, rosy-cheeked, sleeping soundly in his arms. But Slate was gone. He died of hypothermia and severe injuries. His body had stiffened, his arms still curved around you like a cradle, shielding you. And what about the jacket being wet? Nathan hesitated, recalling Felix's chillingly innocent words. Walter let out a laugh, a twisted, bitter smile. Yes. The rescue workers said that when he lifted you up, Slate's jacket was soaked. You had wet yourself out of fear. But he said that perhaps that warm stream from a tiny living being was the only thing that comforted Slate in those freezing final moments of his life. Nathan stood frozen. Every piece of the puzzle had clicked perfectly into place. The one lying beneath that barren dirt mound was not a wandering ghost teasing his son. He was his life-saving benefactor. The man who had sacrificed his own life so Nathan could grow up, be loved, and become a father himself. And for the past 6 months, what had Nathan done? He had treated his benefactor's home like a pile of trash. He had wanted to flatten it. He had forbidden his son from going near it. Because he had no identification papers and no surviving relatives, Walter said softly, his voice heavy with sorrow, the authorities planned to cremate him like an anonymous homeless man. But we, the people who witnessed that night, fought to have him buried right where he fell. Right beside that rock. That's where he performed the greatest act of his life. Nathan gently touched the leaf-shaped birthmark on his neck, the mark of a life purchased at the cost of another. Tears streamed down onto the cold lid of the ammunition crate. "Thank you, Walter," Nathan said, his voice choked but resolute. He hugged the crate to his chest and turned to leave. "I have to go home. Felix is waiting. And Sebastian is waiting too." "What are you going to do?" Walter called after him. Nathan looked back. There was no fear or confusion left in his eyes, now only boundless gratitude and reverence. "I'm going to give him his name back. And I'm going to apologize for trying to bulldoze my benefactor's home." Nathan trudged back from Walter's house, his legs heavy as lead, yet his chest felt strangely light. He cradled the rusted ammunition crate in his arms, trudging through the thick snow toward the wooden house, a place whose true value he only now understood. Audrey was still standing by the back glass door, Felix clinging tightly to his mother's leg. When she saw her husband return with red, shining eyes, Audrey hurriedly opened the door and rushed outside despite the cold. "Nathan," she sobbed, her trembling hand touching the metal crate in his arms. "Is it true? The one lying under there?" "It's him, Audrey," Nathan replied, his voice dropping, breaking apart in the cold wind. "The man who saved me from the burning car back then. The man who used his own life to keep me warm. And all this time, I was planning to use a bulldozer to flatten his resting place." Felix looked up with wide eyes and tugged gently at Nathan's coat hem. "Dad, did you give Mr. Slate his jacket back yet? He said he's very cold." Nathan knelt down and placed the ammunition crate on the white snow, right beside the jagged pit he himself had brutally dug that morning. Guilt surged through him stronger than ever. He had violated his benefactor's sleep. He had let arrogance blind him. "I'm sorry, Felix," Nathan said to his son, but his eyes were fixed on the empty space above the rock. I'm sorry, Sebastian. I'm truly sorry." He reached out, about to shovel the cold clods of earth back into the pit to restore peace to the one lying beneath. But at that moment, a horrifying sound rang out from above. Crack. It wasn't the sound of a dry branch snapping. It was the scream of fresh wood being torn apart. Nathan jerked his head up. Above him, the largest branch of the ancient oak, the witness tree from years ago, already badly damaged by the previous night's blizzard, was breaking free from the trunk. The massive weight of wood, covered in razor-sharp ice and snow, was plunging straight down at terrifying speed. The shadow of death fell over Nathan. He was kneeling. His legs were numb from the cold. He knew he couldn't dodge in time. His mind went blank, managing only one thought: I'm about to die right where he died. "Nathan! Run!" Audrey screamed hysterically, lunging forward but slipping and falling into the snow. But it was Felix's scream that tore through the air. "Mr. Slate! Save Dad!" That moment lasted less than a second, but to Nathan it stretched into eternity. Just as the tip of the massive branch was only a few handbreadths from Nathan's head, an immense pressure exploded against his chest. It wasn't wind. Wind has no shape. Wind has no point of leverage. What struck Nathan was a physical force, solid, decisive. Nathan felt as if two invisible, enormous, powerful hands slammed hard into his chest, violently shoving him backward. The force was so strong that Nathan's large body was hurled away, rolling twice across the soft snow. Boom! The ground shook. The gigantic oak branch smashed into the spot where Nathan had been kneeling a split second earlier. Snow and splintered wood blasted into the air like white fireworks. The jagged points of the branch stabbed deep into the earth right where Nathan's chest had just been. Absolute silence fell for 3 seconds. "Nathan!" Audrey screamed, scrambling through the snow to reach her husband. Nathan lay on his back, gasping, his heart pounding as if it would burst from his chest. He felt himself all over. No pain. No broken bones. He was alive. He slowly propped himself up and stared at the massive branch lying right in front of him. Without that shove, he would have been crushed. What just pushed you?" Audrey asked shakily, clutching Nathan, tears streaming down her face. I saw you suddenly fly backward. Was it the wind? Nathan shook his head, his face drained of all color. He pointed at the empty patch of snow between himself and the fallen branch, the place where the life-saving force had come from. It wasn't the wind, Nathan whispered, his voice trembling with terror and emotion. Look. On the smooth snow, where no one had been standing, were two deep impressions. They weren't footprints of someone walking. They were the marks of two large military boots planted firmly into the snow, braced to channel all their strength into pushing a heavy body backward. The marks of a soldier digging in his heels to save a comrade. Felix toddled over, his small face showing not the slightest trace of fear. The boy casually brushed the snowflakes off Nathan's shoulders, then looked into the invisible space where the footprints were. He's fine, right, Daddy? Felix grinned broadly, as if he had just watched an amusing circus act. Nathan swallowed hard, his throat tight and bitter. He looked at his son, then at the empty space in front of him. Why you? You can see him, Felix? Yes, Felix nodded, then suddenly his voice dropped and his expression grew strangely serious. But he says he's tired. He says he's used up all his strength. He wants to sleep now, Daddy. Nathan shuddered. He remembered Walter's words, he used the last of his body heat to keep you warm. 30 years ago, Sebastian had drained himself to save Nathan from the cold. And today, that soldier's spirit had once again used the last of its remaining strength to push him away from the scythe of death. Nathan fell to his knees in the snow, right in front of the two invisible boot prints. He was no longer afraid. The fear had dissolved, replaced by a sacred reverence. He bowed his head, his forehead pressed to the cold snow, sobbing like a child. Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. I owe you my entire life. The snowy wind suddenly stopped. The entire garden sank into an uncanny peace. Snowflakes drifted gently down, slowly filling in the two military boot prints on the ground, as if the soldier had completed his final mission and quietly withdrawn into eternity. 1 week after the historic snowstorm, the Oregon sky was crystal clear, a deep blue of hope. Gone were the roiling black clouds, gone the howling wind like a wild beast. Only brilliant golden sunlight spread across the grass that was beginning to revive after the freeze. In the backyard, the sound of machinery still echoed, but it was not the destructive roar of a bulldozer Nathan had once threatened to use. It was the smooth, steady hum of stone grinding tools operated by the finest craftsmen in the region. Nathan stood there, holding a small shovel, but this time he wasn't digging in anger. He was carefully mounding soil around clusters of bright purple forget-me-nots on the mound, small flowers symbolizing eternal memory. Audrey stepped out the back door, carrying a tray of hot tea and cookies. She set the tray down on a small wooden table newly placed beside the mound, then walked over to her husband and gently wiped a smear of dirt from his cheek. Do you think he'd like it? Audrey asked softly, her gentle eyes resting on the flowers swaying in the breeze. Nathan paused, leaned on the shovel, and smiled. I don't know. But Walter said Sebastian used to love the blue of the sky. He said it was the only thing Sebastian could see through the gaps in the roof of his ramshackle old shack. Now he has the whole sky. Audrey replied, her voice tinged with emotion. And he has us too. That's right, Nathan nodded, his gaze firm. He'll never be lonely again. The elderly stonemason turned off his machine, brushed the dust from his sleeves, then turned to Nathan and bowed respectfully. It's finished, Mr. Vance. I carved it as deeply as possible, just as you asked. This black marble will last 100 years. Rain and sun won't fade it. Thank you, Nathan said, shaking the man's hand, then calling to his son who was playing on the nearby swing. Felix. Come here, buddy. His new home is finished. Felix ran over, still clutching his favorite red toy car. He stopped in front of the brand new headstone, his big eyes wide with amazement. The once ugly, desolate mound of earth was gone. In its place stood a small, dignified, immaculate memorial space, surrounded by white pebbles and forget-me-nots. And at its center, standing solemn and imposing, was a polished black marble headstone reflecting the brilliant sunlight. Nathan lifted Felix up so the boy could see the carefully engraved gold letters more clearly. "Can you read it, Felix?" Nathan whispered into his son's ear. Felix squinted, slowly sounding out each letter, innocent yet serious. Resting place of Sebastian Slate Miller. He stopped at the smaller line beneath and turned to his father for help. Nathan took a deep breath, his voice trembling with surging emotion as he read it aloud, the line he had spent a sleepless night thinking over. "The man who gave life twice. If you want trace." "Twice, Daddy?" Felix asked, tilting his head in curiosity. "Once for Tiny Daddy, and once for Big Daddy the other day?" "That's right, smart boy." Nathan kissed his son's hair, tears welling at the corners of his eyes. "He saved Daddy when I was just born. And last week, he saved Daddy again from the falling tree. If it weren't for him, Daddy wouldn't be standing here holding you." Audrey stepped closer, placing her hand on her husband and son's shoulders, forming a warm circle around the grave. She looked at the headstone and whispered, "Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for staying. Thank you for protecting my family." Felix wriggled, asking to be put down. Nathan set him on the ground. The boy stepped up to the base of the headstone, where Nathan had reburied the rusted ammunition box, Sebastian's only remaining relic, beneath it with dignity. Felix no longer pointed into empty space, he no longer saw the man in gray clothes huddled from the cold. His eyes were now calm and joyful. He placed his red toy car on the stone base, beside the bouquet of purple forget-me-nots. "For you," Felix said, his clear voice ringing through the still air. "Mr. Walters said you didn't have toys back then. This one goes really fast. You'll like it." Nathan and Audrey looked at each other, smiling through their tears. "Did he say anything, son?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Felix stood up, brushed off his hands, then waved goodbye to the headstone as if to an old friend leaving on a long journey. "No. He didn't say anything else. He just smiled." "How did he smile?" Audrey asked curiously. "He smiled kindly," Felix closed his eyes as he described it. "And he said he was sleepy now. His leg doesn't hurt anymore. The new bed is very warm." Felix turned back and ran into Nathan and Audrey's arms. "Goodbye, sir. Sleep well." A gentle breeze passed through the garden. Strangely, it didn't carry Oregon's biting cold, but a soft warmth, brushing the skin like a comforting pat on the shoulder. The forget-me-nots trembled slightly, as if nodding in response to the child's farewell. Nathan stood upright, lifting a hand to touch the dark red leaf-shaped birthmark on his neck. It was no longer a scar of a painful past. Now it was a medal, a mark of the immense love a stranger had given him. "Sleep well, Slate," Nathan whispered, his voice blending into the wind. "Thank you for waiting for me to come back." "Well," he wrapped his arms around his wife and son and led them back toward the warm wooden house. Behind them, the grave was no longer a frightening mound of earth haunting their dreams. It had become part of the family, a solid and sacred foundation. The long shadows of dusk stretched across it, yet they could not dim the proud gleam of the gold letters. Sebastian Miller, the silent hero. And for the first time since they moved here, the house truly became a home. The deepest lesson from the story. Sometimes, arrogance and the pursuit of material perfection blind adults, leading Nathan to see the resting place of his benefactor as an ugly scar that needed to be erased. Only by looking at life through clear, calculating free eyes like little Felix's can we truly understand the great silent sacrifices around us. The story reminds us that a beautiful house is not built from precious wood or reinforced glass, but from respect for the past. A true home is formed only when people know how to bow their heads in gratitude to the sacred values that have protected their lives.